The training grounds on Zelkari's Prime were bustling with activity. Alien students of various species, each from a different corner of the galaxy, gathered under the watchful eyes of their instructors. The air was thick with anticipation as a new set of combat drills was about to begin. Among the students stood Rael, a towering zenith warrior with obsidian skin and eyes that gleamed with intensity. His people were known for their immense physical strength and rigorous combat discipline. Next to him, a slight figure stood out, a human. Bare-chested, lean, yet radiating a quiet confidence. The others sneered at the sight of him. Humans, after all, were considered inferior in direct combat. That one, scoffed Vec, a four-armed Jorash with rippling muscles and skin the color of molten iron. He's not even wearing armor. Is this a joke? Rael's eyes flicked toward the human, a smirk playing on his lips. We'll see how long he lasts, he muttered, his voice low. The training instructor, a Terrell with sharp tusks and crimson eyes, strode into the center of the training ground. His gaze lingered on the human for a moment before he raised his voice. Begin the drill. Holographic dummies materialized in a ring around the trainees. Each one flickered with simulated weapons, blades, maces, and energy hammers, all designed to test even the best warriors. The dummies hummed as they prepared to launch their attacks. Rael immediately donned his armor, the protective plates shimmering with advanced tech. Vec followed suit, his forearms strapping into reinforced gauntlets. But the human stood motionless, unarmed, unprotected. His eyes, however, were sharp, focused. One of the dummies lunged toward Rael, its energy blade flashing. Rael parried with ease, his heavy armor absorbing the impact. Meanwhile, Vec was already smashing two dummies at once, his strength overpowering the simulations. But it was the human that caught everyone's attention. Without armor, without any visible weapon, he twisted gracefully to avoid a spear thrust. His movements were fluid, faster than expected, almost too fast. He sidestepped a second attack, ducked under a blade swing, and with a sudden burst of speed, closed the distance between him and one of the holographic dummies. His bare fist connected with the construct's midsection, disrupting the simulation entirely. The aliens gasped. How was this possible? Vec's voice dripped with disbelief. He's not even using any equipment. How can he keep up? Rael narrowed his eyes. This is no ordinary human. The human weaved through the holograms, each movement precise, every step deliberate. His body was a blur of motion, dodging and countering the strikes that would have incapacitated most species. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The human launched himself into the air, spinning in mid-flight to deliver a kick that sent another hologram flickering. As he landed, his muscles flexed with the effort, sweat trickling down his bare chest. Yet there was no sign of fear or hesitation in his eyes, only focus. The Terrell instructor watched with a growing scowl. He had never seen anything like it. Enough, he barked, his voice echoing across the grounds. The holograms froze, then flickered out, leaving the human standing amidst the deactivated dummies, his breathing steady and scathed. Impressive, the instructor grunted, walking toward the human. But let's see how you handle a real challenge. He gestured toward a rack of weapons nearby. Pick one. The human shook his head. I don't need a weapon. A ripple of murmurs spread through the students. Was this human insane? Rael exchanged a glance with Vec, both of them clearly unnerved by the human's calm defiance. You mock this drill, the instructor growled, his tusks gleaming in the light. Do you think you're invincible? The human's gaze was cold and steady. No, he said simply. But I don't rely on weapons or armor to win. A tense silence followed. The other students watched in shock as the Terrell's expression twisted into something between anger and fascination. This was unprecedented. No one had ever refused a weapon in these drills, let alone survived without one. The Terrell instructor snarled, very well. Let's see if you can handle this. He gestured, and a new set of holograms appeared. But this time, they weren't just stationary. They formed a complete circle around the human, each one armed with lethal-looking weapons, all poised to strike in unison. The human's eyes glinted with something almost predatory. He shifted his stance, his muscles coiling with anticipation. "Begin," the instructor shouted. The lights flickered as the advanced hologram sprung into motion, a coordinated assault from every angle. The ring of alien students surrounding the training grounds gasped, eyes wide as they watched the human, still unarmed and unarmored, face down the impending onslaught. The first attack came from behind, an energy blade slicing through the air toward his spine. Without even turning, the human ducked low, his reflexes impossibly fast. The blade passed harmlessly overhead as he rolled forward, springing to his feet just in time to block a spear thrust with his forearm. In one fluid motion, he twisted the spear from the hologram's grip and used it to parry a hammer strike aimed at his ribs. Vec's jaw dropped. "He's fighting them like they're nothing." Rael's brow furrowed. This wasn't just skill, it was something else. "I've seen the best of the Zenith warriors in combat drills, and even they don't move like that," he muttered, his eyes locked on the human's every movement. "It's like he knows what's coming before it even happens." Another hologram lunged at the human, its dual blades spinning in a deadly dance. The human sidestepped the first blade, caught the second mid-swing, and in a shocking display of raw power, snapped the simulated weapon in half with his bare hands. He followed up with a swift kick that sent the hologram stumbling back before it deactivated in a burst of static. The alien students murmured in disbelief. This wasn't how the drill was supposed to go. It was designed to overwhelm, to expose weaknesses and push soldiers to their limits. Yet the human, without armor or advanced technology, was dismantling it piece by piece. The Terrell instructor's face twisted in frustration as he watched the human glide through the holographic enemies like a seasoned predator among prey. "Increase difficulty," he barked. The control panel operator hesitated for a moment, before cranking the simulation to its highest setting. The remaining holograms began to move faster, their strikes more aggressive, more coordinated. But the human didn't flinch. If anything, he moved with even greater precision, his body becoming a blur of motion. He ducked under a sweeping blade, spun away from a hammer blow, and countered with a series of rapid strikes that shattered the defense of 3 holograms in the blink of an eye. Rael could barely keep up with what he was seeing. "How is he?" "He's not even breaking a sweat." Vec interrupted, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "This is insane. No one can do this without armor, without something." Another set of holograms appeared, attacking from all sides with synchronized precision. This time, the human didn't just avoid their strikes, he turned their attacks against them. A holographic spear aimed for his chest was grabbed mid-thrust and used to impale another attacker. A sword swung toward his head was deflected with a forearm, before he delivered a crushing elbow strike that deactivated the hologram in an instant. With every movement, every counterattack, the human seemed to become more efficient, more lethal. He wasn't just surviving the drill, he was dominating it. The Terrell instructor's fists clenched as he watched the human systematically dismantle his most advanced combat program. His pride as an instructor was being shattered before his eyes. "This is impossible," he muttered under his breath. The human spun, his bare foot connecting with a holographic hammer wielder, sending it crashing to the ground in a flicker of static. As he stood there, surrounded by the remains of his holographic enemies, his chest heaving slightly, there was a brief moment of stillness. For the first time, a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "Enough," the instructor's voice boomed, the command halting the drill. The last of the holograms deactivated, leaving the human alone in the center of the training ground, his body bruised but still standing tall. The students were silent. No one knew what to say. They had never seen anything like it, this raw display of power and skill from a species they had always considered weaker, lesser. The Terrell instructor stepped forward, his gaze hard as he approached the human. "You've proven you can handle holograms," he growled. "But simulations are one thing. Real combat is another." The human wiped the sweat from his brow, his breathing steady once again. "I'm aware." The instructor's eyes narrowed. "You think you can handle a real fight? A fight against me?" A ripple of shock ran through the students. The instructor, a veteran of countless wars and battles, was known throughout the galaxy as one of the most formidable warriors in the Terrell Empire. And now, he was challenging the human. The human's gaze didn't waver. "If you're ready to lose," he said, his tone as calm as ever. The instructor's nostrils flared, his pride stung by the human's words. Without another word, he reached for a weapon from the rack, an energy spear, its blade glowing with a deadly hum. He twirled it expertly in his hands, taking up a combat stance. The human remained unarmed, his eyes locked on the instructor. "Begin," the instructor snarled. With a burst of speed that belied his size, the Terral instructor lunged forward, the energy spear aimed directly at the human's heart. But the human was ready. He sidestepped the thrust with ease, his movements a blur of agility. His hands shot out, grabbing the spear shaft just below the blade. With a swift twist, he yanked the weapon from the instructor's grip and spun, swinging the spear in a wide arc that stopped just inches from the instructor's neck. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The instructor stood still, his eyes wide as he stared at the spear hovering near his throat. The human's eyes were cold, unyielding. "It's not about strength," he said quietly, "it's about knowing your enemy." The students watched in stunned silence as the human tossed the spear to the ground, stepping back. He wasn't even breathing hard. The Terral instructor's pride was shattered. He stood there, motionless, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Slowly, he nodded, lowering his head in a gesture of respect. The human turned to leave, his part in the drill complete. As he walked away, Rail stared after him, his mind racing. What kind of species is this? The air in the training ground was thick with a sense of disbelief and awe. The human had done the unthinkable. He had not only survived the most advanced combat simulation without any armor or weaponry but had also bested the Terral instructor in a real confrontation. The students, aliens from various species known for their own combat prowess, exchanged uneasy glances. What they had just witnessed defied everything they knew about warfare, about survival. Rail's eyes were locked on the human as he walked toward the edge of the training ground, his bare feet stepping lightly on the metallic floor. How is this possible?" Rail whispered, his mind racing with questions. His body, though powerful and honed by years of training, felt insignificant compared to the raw, unrelenting force he had seen in the human. Vec, standing beside him, was still wide-eyed, his arms hanging limply at his sides. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered, voice trembling. "We use technology, enhancements, the best armor in the galaxy, and he does that? Without anything? What kind of monsters are humans?" The Terral instructor, still standing in the center of the training ground, finally broke the silence. His voice, though rough, carried a newfound respect. "Oh, human," he called, his tone no longer filled with arrogance but something closer to reverence. "Come back here." The human paused, turning to face the instructor, his eyes still calm, unreadable. "What now?" "You have proven yourself in a simulation," the instructor said, stepping forward. "But there is one last thing you must face." His eyes gleamed with challenge, though the edge of his pride had clearly been dulled by his earlier defeat. "This is no drill. It is real. The students will face you together." A collective gasp rose from the gathered students. Real combat? Against this human? Rail's pulse quickened, his thoughts racing. Could they really take him on? Could all of them together match this strange, terrifying human? The human raised an eyebrow, seemingly unfazed by the prospect of facing dozens of combat-trained aliens at once. Together? He glanced at the group of alien students, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You think that'll make a difference?" The Terral instructor's face hardened. "It's not about whether you can win or lose. It's about showing these students something they need to learn." He took a step back, folding his arms. "You will face them all." "No." Without another word, the students began to move. Rail's heart pounded in his chest as he and the others spread out, encircling the human. Some brandished energy blades, others gripped maces or spears. The air buzzed with tension as each alien warrior sized up their opponent. For a moment, no one moved. The human stood still, his body relaxed, eyes scanning the crowd with a casual confidence that sent shivers down Rail's spine. Then, the first attack came. A Jorash warrior, large and heavy-set, charged in with a guttural roar, his energy mace raised high. The human sidestepped the swing effortlessly, his movements almost lazy. As the Jorash stumbled past, the human's fist shot out, connecting with the alien's midsection in a blur of motion. The Jorash crumpled to the ground, wheezing. Before anyone could react, 2 more students lunged from the sides, their energy blades slashing in unison. The human ducked under one blade, spun away from the other, and in a single fluid motion, swept one attacker's legs out from under him while disarming the second with a sharp twist of his wrist. Both fell to the ground, dazed. Rail couldn't believe what he was seeing. The human moved like no creature he had ever encountered. It wasn't just strength or speed, it was something far more terrifying. He seemed to be predicting their moves, reacting before any of them could land a strike. Vec growled in frustration beside him. "We'll overwhelm him. Go." Rail followed Vec's lead, rushing forward with the rest of the students. The group of alien warriors swarmed the human from all directions, their weapons flashing in the air. But no matter how many came at him, the human was always one step ahead. He ducked, weaved, twisted, and countered with devastating efficiency. Every strike he delivered was precise, incapacitating without unnecessary violence. Every movement was calculated, fluid, almost graceful. Rail swung his energy blade toward the human's chest, hoping to catch him off guard. But the human caught the blade mid-swing, gripping Rail's wrist with iron strength. In the same motion, he pulled Rail forward and twisted his arm, forcing him to drop the weapon. Rail stumbled, pain shooting up his arm, as the human released him and moved on to the next challenger. One by one, the students fell, not from the brutality of the strikes but from the sheer superiority of the human skill. The gap between them was unfathomable. Within minutes, the ground was littered with groaning bodies. Rail, panting and clutching his aching arm, watched in stunned silence as the human stood alone, victorious once again. The Terrell instructor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Enough," he said quietly. His eyes swept over the defeated students before settling on the human. "You have proven more than I ever expected. But tell me, human, what drives you? How are you able to push beyond your limits, beyond anything we've seen?" The human's gaze flickered, and for the first time, there was a glint of something deeper in his eyes, something raw, something primal. "Survival," he answered simply, his voice calm but filled with an unshakable certainty. "We come from a world that doesn't care whether we live or die. So, we learn. We adapt. We survive." He turned his back to the instructor, beginning to walk away from the training ground, his body marked with the faint bruises of battle but his spirit unbroken. As he walked, the alien students remained where they were, lying on the ground in disbelief, their pride shattered. Vec, nursing a bruised side, managed to sit up. "Is that it?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "He's just walking away?" Rail watched the human leave, a strange feeling settling in his chest. Respect. Fear. Maybe both. "He doesn't need to stay," Rail said quietly, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. "He's already won. And he didn't need armor or weapons to do it." The Terrell instructor nodded slowly, watching the human disappear from view. "This was not just a test of combat," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "It was a lesson, one we will not soon forget." The human's figure grew smaller in the distance, but his presence lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed him. He was not just a fighter, not just a warrior. He was something more. Something that defied their understanding of strength and survival. And as the sun set over the training grounds of Zelkari's Prime, the alien students knew one thing for certain: they had just encountered the very essence of what made humans truly terrifying. The end.